Hi, it's me, Rasheed, Ogunlaru, coach, speaker, and author, and I'm really delighted to be here with my best buddy, Marcus Fellows, my oldest friend, not oldest.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
That's a great start.
Thank you. Sorry for that. No, I now have no friends left. But we wanted to stop by and talk about mindfulness, mental health, men's health, and Marcus, lots of people who know you now, I know you from a previous incarnation, will know you as the founder of Barbershop Botanicals. You produce a range of products for men's hair, particularly, and you have a barbershop in the South Downs as well. And people might think it's a bit odd for you to necessarily be interested in mental health, but I guess anybody who's ever sat in a barber's chair is going to know that you're going to be hearing people's life stories all the time, and lots of the ups and downs.
Yeah, exactly.
So why does this topic kind of sit with you? Why do you care a lot about it? Because I understand that you've been doing some promotional stuff around this.
Yeah, so obviously there's a level of intimacy in the barbershop, and people relax, they feel more comfortable, and they can share stories, they can share life situations. So you can get below the base level of conversation and talk about deeper issues or things. It doesn't have to be. I mean, you can just have a laugh. But you get to, it's an honour to actually be in a space where, people are sharing. I share, they share. And it's very therapeutic for people. And you can cover a lot of ground. You cover a lot of ground from, health, well-being, relationships. You cover all the bases. But more often than not, the common ground is for men, a lot of men that come into the shop, is that there's a slight feeling of unworthiness, or just something's not quite right with them, and they'll attribute it to all of the classic conditioning of masculinity and what masculinity is. Because that's a loaded subject in itself, isn't it? Masculinity. I mean, the concepts of masculinity, what are they?
So there's so much in there, isn't there, Marcus? That you'd think about it on the surface. Somebody's just going into a barbershop to have a nice haircut and to look good and to go out or to look professional, what have you. And yet, when people get into that chair, it's about so many other things. And when we put that hand in hand with how typically men don't talk about as much, certainly as women, their emotions, how they're feeling, or
we're kind of raised not to share, aren't we?
Right.
Stiff upper lip, keep it repressed,
right.
Just carry on. But it's not healthy, as we're seeing more and more now. People are realising that that's not the way forward. You got to be a bit vulnerable, you got to be a bit sensitive, and sharing's a great way, isn't it? They do say that just problem shared is halved.
Did you know when you first opened the barber shop, or did you have an inkling that this stuff would emerge? Because I know at that time, it's funny, I got the previous knowledge and knowing that you've done a lot of work around meditation, mindfulness, at quite a deep level. We've spent a number of years looking into all of this kind of stuff. Did you know that this stuff would really emerge? Because I got the feeling that you weren't at that point that interested. So were you aware at that point, once you started cutting hair, that actually this would emerge and lots of people would want to open up, especially with somebody who's sensitive enough to be able to provide that space and comfortable enough?
Yeah, I think if you act as a very clean mirror for them to be able to share in, sharing your own story. I mean, I went through a particularly tough time recently, and people know that, and I guess they were witnessing me go through that and being honest and sharing and transparent about my own experiences. I guess that gave them the space to be able to think, God, if this guy's going through something, look at what I'm going through, I can share that in a safe place. And the barbershop and the barber chair, the way we work, the way I work, is it's kind of a one-chair shop, so you have an intimate space just to come and be, booked by appointment, so you come in, you get your hour in the chair, and you can say and do whatever you want.
That's very, I think that's very powerful, and that's very profound, isn't it, that space, because I guess week in and week out, people have got a lot going on. It would seem, and I wonder, have you seen that during the course of time doing this, that it would just seem that the pace often of people's lives, I know people have talked about fast-paced life probably from the 80s and so on, but have you really noticed it the pace of people's lives, the expectations, also the social media, the 24/7, and that whilst people are surrounded by lots of stuff and on paper that they're connected, that actually often they're quite isolated or feel that they're struggling with lots of stuff.
You can, even in a group, even in a family units where you feel close, you can still feel alone and you can still feel isolated. And a lot of people I know that the depression word suffer with depression. They do feel isolated. They, even though they're going through all the motions. Lots of people, you hear about suicides that happen, and you think, people, they convey that they had no idea because everything seemed all right. So men are classic, and they bottle stuff up. And we are overwhelmed with the level of activity that we need to do just to be able to, literally just to tread water nowadays, not even to get ahead, just to keep things ticking over. And I think there definitely comes a point where the whole nervous system just gets overwhelmed, people can't cope anymore, so they use all the avoidance, escape strategies like drinking, drugs, or whatever, movies, Netflix, wherever they just pour their attention, their escape routes. Rather than actually looking at and slowing down and maybe putting things in perspective. Again, the barbershop is a place where you totally stop, just put everything on hold. A timeless space where you can just it's like a snow globe, so life shakes you up, and then you sit there and it's all just chilling.
So it sounds like you're very, very aware of that. I know that, and I've been to the shop and space. Tell me a little bit about how you then decided to create the environment that would feel safe. I know you've got an advantage in that where you're based in the South Downs, beautiful space. There's the countryside and so on, and that there is already a sense of that outer kind of space. But even so, it's quite interesting to hear that still people have got, of course, their own challenges wherever they live. But tell me a little bit about how you've gone about trying to create that conditions that people feel most safe, so that they can.
Quite nurtured, yeah. It's a nurturing space. So basically, how the music that plays is really chilled out. It's very laid back. We diffuse, which I'll talk about when we talk about the products. We diffuse natural essential oils that have an effect on the environment as well, so they'll help you calm down the environment. But everyone that comes in says, this is their Zen time, this is their time just to...
So they recognise it, recognise it, yeah.
Exactly, but it's not being dressed up to be a place where you come for counselling or you come for anything other than a haircut, to feel good about yourself, to look good, and just chill,
I think
take that time out. That's important, isn't it?
Right, and it's an interesting point that you make, isn't it, that very often when it comes to, I guess, the more pronounced side of where people are going through major challenges, there are counsellors for people wanting, or people like me, a life coach where people are wanting to get their life back on track, maybe after there's been a thing like a redundancy or whatever it might well be, therapy and all of that kind of stuff. But it's interesting that, given that we know often men don't go to those places, and sometimes when things are lower level, that they probably want a space that isn't about any of that stuff, where they can still talk and open up and share. Do you think that it's the thing that jumps into my mind is that there's been a news report quite recently about an initiative to train up lots of hairdressers and so on to be able to spot the signs of where people might be struggling with mental health and so on. So I guess there's this recognition that these safer spaces that aren't anything to do with healing, therapy,
exactly. Without the labels. And I
Right.
think, again, the barbershop, not specifically my barbershop, but I know it's an honour to have the role as being a barber and holding that space for guys that come in and they do share. And there is a saying that, what's said in the chair, what happens in the chair stays in the chair, and that is the barber code. And it's important, and guys know that. So it's, I guess, like a taxi driver or somewhere else, people just get in. With taxi drivers, you probably never see them again, and you can people share all manner of things, don't they, and then go off on their way.
It's very powerful what you're saying there, and I love that thing when you said this, like the barber's
it's like a barber code, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Barbers know it.
And when you trained as a barber, did this come up a lot in the training, that there was the discussion that people will, or did they only just focus on hair, or did they touch on the fact that
It was mainly about the cutting, the learning of skills. It didn't go into this, and for me, this was the added bonus to it, that you could actually form relationships with other guys, and their families as well, their children. It's a big responsibility. So you form these lovely bonds with people, and over the years, you watch the children grow, you know, you grow with them, they share, you're going through stuff, and it's a really nice community, and I think there's a lot of support in that community, and you know, I run kind of men's groups as well, but we might go on a walk, talk, you know, people come in and hang out, have a couple of drinks, and just chill, and it's kind of a place for like-minded guys just to come and be together in a non softly way, just guys being guys, and guys being guys that can be complete guys, not just the facade of what back to the conditioning of what masculinity is, you know, guys just being vulnerable, and that's fine. It's a completely non-judgmental space where you can be vulnerable without putting labels on anything. You just actually be yourself without being vulnerable, being this, being that, being, you know, just honouring everything. Everything's allowed. It's not like, no, you're not allowed to feel negative, because we live in an environment, we live in a society where negativity is frowned upon. All every negative aspect is we just we try and keep it at arm's length or just hide from it. No, everything's fine, everything's positive, but that's a problem in itself, because positivity is just the veneer of negativity, you know, and it's just, you know, it's just about being real, you know.
Do people find that they? I mean, there's so many things that jump out from what you've said already, and it reminds me of when I was a Samaritan volunteer, and I was lucky enough for a while to be co-director of the Samaritans in Central London, and it was really interesting. I heard very, very late, actually, fun enough in my career, a couple of stories, including how the Samaritans was founded, and how the founder of Samaritans often would say that we would quite like to be supported by somebody who was on their very first shift. And the whole idea around the Samaritans was that this guy, Chad Varro, his name was, and he was a very young priest, and his very first service he had to conduct was a lady who took her own life. She was her first period, she didn't know what's going on, apparently she took her own life, tragic story. And he set up a time where people could come along and they could come and talk and share. And then he was so busy with people wanting to come and see him that he got some people locally, they were all women, who just listened to people. Well, actually this is the thing, technically they're making cups of tea. By the time they went to see him, they were fine, because they just listened. Their job wasn't to be this or that, they were just to be there. Yeah. So I guess that there's actually a history of these spaces, maybe, you know, these spaces where people go to have that space where people can just be and just talk. Definitely. One of the things I wonder, Marcus, are some people surprised when they sit down in the chair? And I think what's quite lovely about your shop currently is it's a very intimate space where you normally have just one or maybe two people and a couple of people in at a time, isn't it?
Yeah, one person in the chair. Someone might come in early, and, you know, and then other days people are just coming in and hanging out. You know, they're not even there for a haircut; they're just coming in for a cup of tea.
So does that mean that when that person's just sat in the chair, let's say I'm lucky enough that it's just me on that day and there's nobody else coming, do people find that they open up more than perhaps they expected to? Are people sometimes surprised by how much they've opened up about what's going on for them? Do people ever comment on that?
Yeah, they comment. Most people that come through go, you know, you're my therapist. So, which is nice, isn't it? You know, as I say, it's an honour, isn't it? You know, if someone shares something with you, you know, that's a great honour, isn't it? You know?
There have been times where you've been, I mean, without again breaking the barber's code and so on, have there been times where you've been really, really worried about where somebody's?
Yeah, definitely.
And what do you do there? Tell me what and how do you help? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we're linked to another company called Calm, and they deal with mental health stuff as well. So then there's plenty of things around. There's magazines, there's different things. So you don't necessarily have to, like, you know, try and lecture people on, you know, or try and create another positive veneer. Again, as I said, it's never about that. So there are things around that they can look at, and you'll notice that they'll sit down and pick things up.
I see.
But then,
so there's help and support and groups or useful stuff.
Exactly, there's things that they can get hold of. But another one is that then they'll book in another appointment, and then some people do say that, you know, right, really looking forward to seeing you next time, and they can almost gauge that they'll be all right until they come in next time. So then, and they might even check in with you via text or something, just to, you know, say hi, or, you know, maybe struggling with something, and then you can just respond as you need to. But that's just part of it. I know a lot of people don't do that because it's, you know, it's more about a service, you're cutting hair and the rest of it. But, you know, there's a lot of guys out there that generally care for other guys as well, and it's not just about providing that service of cutting hair. It's about being there for people, you know.
What is it about men, do you think, and we've kind of touched on it, why they often struggle so much. We know, of course, that there's conditioning and all of the rest of it, and yet at the same time, there's been, let's take, for example, a business like yours and so on. A long time ago, that people weren't as conscious of their grooming, or how they looked and so on. So it would, on the one hand, seem that men are, people talk about, over the last 20 years, the more sensitive male, the more rounded male, and all of the rest of it. But yet we know when it comes to health, when it comes to their mental health and so on, men still really struggle. What's your take on that? Why still men struggle so much?
Well, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because this version of masculinity, as we say, it's almost like you don't look after yourself, because that's either gay or weak or whatever, and it's just bullshit, isn't it? And nowadays men are taking more care of themselves, and the appreciation from their partners is even better, because they're saying it's so nice that they're stealing their products.
But on that note, I guess, is there still, I guess it's, and you picked up on it, there are still these very clear notions of what a guy should be, what a straight guy should be, what a gay guy could be, or any type of those incarnations of guys.
Living by those labels.
Right.
And, it's like weakness, isn't it? If I'm sharing, I'm weak. It's a sign of weakness.
Right.
I must be strong. I must keep this facade of strength, which is the conditioning that I've received, as most men. But as we see now, in this day and age now, it's failing miserably, Everybody's recognising that, guys can't hold this together as well. Some can, some can't. Some more sensitive, and just the acknowledgement that you can be sensitive and vulnerable as well is empowering in itself. This version of what a strong man is, because they can handle so much physically.
And so therefore that means so you don't cry, you don't talk about it, you don't share it, you just keep it all in, the stiff upper lip, all of those things, and those messages still continue to kind of permeate through.
Exactly. And if you notice with a lot of guys, it's like, for me, the true show of strength is, can you be vulnerable? Can you be sensitive? Can you be honest? Can you be transparent? Because for me, that takes a lot more strength to actually release those attributes, because they're all part of they're all part of the personality, they're all part of the makeup, aren't they?
Can I ask, I'm curious to know a little bit about, again, from your experience, people who don't know you, or maybe even some of the people who do, they'll know you through barbershop botanicals, they know you from your barbershop, but as I said before, they may not know the long history of your own journey and all the time you've spent on that kind of journey of what we call that self-discovery and mindfulness, meditation. I remember we had a conversation about this long before they were really fashionable. I remember saying to you, Marcus, I don't think people are ready for mindfulness, meditation, all of the rest of it. It's like, people wouldn't be ready. But I think what I kind of wanted to ask is that all of this stuff points to then identity.
Yeah.
Do you find that sometimes the door that this opens when people are sat in the chair, especially in your chair, they realise it's not just a chat, this is a space where all of the different labels of who they are, they can fall away, they can dissolve. Tell me, have you had experiences where people are really therefore beginning to question everything, who they are, what they should be doing, all that, and asking these deep questions, the who am I kind of questions? And can you tell me a little bit about that, and do people find that very, 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 very frightening? Because again, I just feel as I've come in to, I'm having my hair cut, and I can talk about things, or what's been stressing me out at work or at home or relationships or lack of, or the rest of it, or stress and all the rest of it. But we still tend to look at it still very superficially through those roles, through those different lenses. So tell me what happens when I know you have a very subtle way of doing it, when the person finds themselves asking lots of fundamental questions, or when people have gone through the very serious circumstances like you have, where there's been bereavement, where there's been real serious issues that means that people have got to ask themselves all those questions. What happens there, and have you seen that? Because it must be scary when somebody finds that all of the labels of who they perceive that they are and begin to unravel. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because we're still conditioned that I am still this, I am my job, I am this, I am that. What's your views about when people who've never had any exposure to the stuff that we've had an exposure to, and beware, this is the longest question of all time, but where people haven't had that exposure, men find themselves having to ask those really fundamental questions. who am I? Am I my job? Am I this relationship? Am I this supposed to be the strong person? I found myself now in this chair and I've been very vulnerable. Tell me your experience around that and anything you'd share.
Well, I think with, as we're saying about life and the uncertainty of life, jobs aren't as stable, the situation, I mean, look at Brexit, everything's just up in the air at the moment. It does pull you to start asking these deeper questions of yourself, doesn't it? Because I guess as you get older as well, you've been through enough of the same scenarios again and again, like Groundhog Day, to start thinking, Christ Almighty, there's got to be something slightly deeper to my life experience. So then that throws you start looking around, maybe pick up some books, start asking some questions, and start picking up a few of the little spiritual concepts, like the present moment, like the Buddhist concepts, or whatever. You start tuning into something other than looking at concepts, looking at fulfillment through things, and then you start, because there's a lovely quote, isn't there, say the most important thing in life isn't things, or it's not things. And it's true, isn't it? And once you've played with things for a while, played with people and all these other things, you kind of, part of you, probably your heart or whatever you want to call it, your heart, wants a bit more depth. You know, the mind's had its play in life, and you know, it's probably made a fucking car crash of most situations. And then the heart wants to get involved because it wants a richer, deeper experience, and it's noticing that avoidance, escape strategies, compensatory activities are no longer going to be the thing that sustain that depth of understanding. So they'll start looking at themselves, they'll start turning inward, and they'll start asking some deeper questions, and maybe getting some deeper answers. The deeper answers will reveal that understanding that there's more to life than fighting, aggression, you know, one-upmanship, you know, selfish.
And do they find themselves particularly asking those questions of you? Do they, because you've been on this path, do they find that they're asking these questions? I mean, you know, exploring questions for you, not asking you to definitively, but do they find that they know that you're somebody who particularly where that they can sense that there's a path that you've walked here? Tell me a little bit about that.
I guess a lot of people know my story, to go from acting to banking to singing to bus driving to whatever, you know. So a lot of people know that I've had a lot of life experiences, and we share that way, and then you share your own experiences. You know, other people start sharing, and they'll naturally ask you, you know, how you came to be doing what you're doing now, and then... Because
this is where the success, sorry to interrupt, but this is where it's useful to bring in this success thing, because lots of people who also, that you coach in the part of the world that you are, many of them are very wealthy, very successful, they're living in this beautiful part of the world, maybe they've had big careers in this field, that field. In a way, they should be top of their game.
Yeah, they should be utterly happy with no moments of unhappiness.
Right.
Because apparently we're sold that if you have everything, what could you possibly
big house, the car, family,
token partner, or whatever they are.
Beautiful surroundings.
Yeah.
But yet you still find noisy mind, unhappiness, discontent.
You find the same stuff that's there for everybody, and the only thing that the people that don't have it, they have a preconceived idea that once they get it, they'll be happy too, because that's what it looks like on the surface.
Right.
And you know, then coming back again to say different mental states, say for instance, if I'm feeling negative today, that will taint and filter my life experience in the same way. So I'll look at other people around me and I'll perceive them to be happier, better off than me, have everything that I don't have, and you know, it just perpetuates the same cycle. But you know, when you get to the other side and you see these people that apparently do have all these things, again we're talking about things, we've already gone beyond the point of things, and they're in the same situation. Yeah, they suffer their misery and more comfort, you can say.
So, I mean, I'm mindful about time, and my camera is telling me that there's less time, but I wonder if I want to just touch on a couple of things, building on what you shared there, in terms of, I guess what comes through to me then is that, okay, I realised that first of all that sometimes as a man, talking about my own self or how I feel or my circumstances or my own mental health or the stress or whatever, that's important.
Yeah.
Then there's this thing, okay, it's also fine to then begin to explore identity, who are we and so on, and maybe this life beyond things.
Well, each one, I mean, the things you're raising, you know that they have to be independently looked at. You know, what is identity? That in itself is a dialogue. All of these, I mean, we've had a quick skirting over a lot of topics, but you know that discussions we have, each topic itself would be a conversation in itself, and we've just kind of, this is just skimming the surface.
And I like what you said there, that really then, what I guess imagine is that then there's a beginning of real self-discovery.
Exactly,
Real self-discovery. So I started from the thing where I'm holding everything in and got all these ideas about myself, but then it takes us to a place of self-discovery, where, as you said, I love the bit where you talked about people and they might find themselves reading a few books, or you know, you talked about going for a few walks. So these are things that you find that therefore begin this
in
process.
a light, easy way, without it becoming like deep therapy where they have to uncover something. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because that's something in itself, but a lot of guys don't want that. The fact that they're opening up and they're sharing and they're being more open and transparent is amazing, and it's so liberating, and you notice it a mile off, and you see people coming in with a smile, and you think, you know, what happened? Said, well, you know how when I'm in these situations I usually do this, well this time I didn't do that, and the outcome is completely different, and they go, this shit works, and then they go deeper into it once they see that it works.
Are they more able to, do you find that they're more able to first of all open up to themselves and open up to...
That's what it's all about ultimately, isn't it? And we're only mirroring ourselves, aren't we? Mirroring the other person.
Right.
And then they become more fluid, and they're not fixed.
When you say more fluid, just more in flow with life rather than battling
exactly,
it.
rather than this fixed idea of themselves.
Right.
It's just more fluid. You can wiggle, you can move with life. You know, as we know, you talk about change and dealing with change and transitions. Well, that's the constant, isn't it? That's all we ever have, isn't it? We have an idea of how life should be, and we live by expectation, and then we get beyond that and we realise it's fluid, it can change, it's changeable. And then if I don't have expectations, then I'm more free.
So if I don't have the expectations on myself, how my life should be,
or how I should or shouldn't be.
How this relationship should pan out, or my job, or
it's
this
tiring,
project.
He should have said this. I should have done that.
My favourite one is when people say they're meant to be together. You know, to me, it's something it's meant to be.
That's because you were born together. You were separated at birth, and now you found each other again.
Well, I wonder, maybe just as we wrap up this first discussion, I wonder if could you just share a few tips from your own experience, because as it's been very much a whistle stop, really sketch to touch on some of these things around mindfulness, mental health and men's health, and maybe could you give any tips to anyone who's finding that they're in this space of, I guess that their mind is very, very noisy and they're feeling kind of overwhelmed, and I guess that you, fortunately without labelling, we've begun to talk about some of the things like mindfulness, which is where we're just being far more fluid and we're just letting the ideas flow rather than trying to grab hold of them. But would you have any tips for anyone who's like listening to this and thinking, well, there's something interesting about what you're talking about, but I can't begin to know where to where to start. I don't know. I know that you're saying something, but I feel as though I'm in a different room to arriving at any kind of peace. What would you say?
Well, the thing is, if you think about the mind, it's very powerful. So the mind can kind of hold you captive, and let's determine between kind of mind and heart, and then that clarity that comes out of understanding how they both work together. The mind, it's a narrative. The voice in the head will tell you this all day long about how good you are, how bad you are, how you need to do this, how everything needs to be like that. All the stars need to align for you to be able to do anything in life. And then the mind then also kicks your ass and says, no, you're unworthy, you're not good enough. And as I said, that then really has a filter on existence around you. So you look at people and you think, oh, I wish I could be like that. And then you just become, defeated by everything because of the mind. The mind is saying you can't, the mind is saying this. And it's a matter of starting to look at that and being aware of the mind and listening to the same stories, and then see how they feel and how you embody those thoughts. And then the feelings that you feel then get translated into these concepts of the mind as well. So you create this loop between feeling and thinking. So first we've got to understand how the mind works, how the emotions work, how they tie together. So looking at anything, I don't know, picking up a book on mindfulness, or starting to understand that the voice in the head is not you, and understanding that this is a story, and then if you fuel it with your attention, it's just getting stronger and stronger, and then it just perpetuates itself over and over again. Again, this is so crude in how I'm having to describe this, because again, this would be another dialogue where we'd have to unravel stuff. But I would. But
that in itself is a huge discovery,
isn't it? Huge discovery.
That I've got this. Okay, there's this story going on in my mind. There's this narrative, and now you're saying that if I'm putting a lot of attention, and then I'm kind of. But it's like I'm putting more wood into the fire.
Exactly, you're fueling it.
Right.
But if you I'm not saying detach, but if you witness the mind, like you were doing meditation, you sit down, but you can do this in everyday life, you don't have to sit down or do any practice. You just start watching the mind and you'll see the same stories. And then what happens if you ignore those stories? What about if you do this? Okay, well that's almost having it. I mean, there is a scenario where, someone said that, if you shared a flat with that mind, that person in your mind that's telling you, if you shared a house, an apartment, a flat, whatever it was, you'd have them out there by the end of the week. If you're my mind, then you need to be working on my behalf. And if you're not working on my behalf, then we need to have a serious discussion here. And we'll pull the mind out here, and let's have a proper look at it. And the worst thing you ever hear, again skirting over all this, is that someone, because they don't know how to deal with their mind, will kill their body. The body's got nothing to do with it.
I love when you often point out this thing about this thing about how people effectively, in its most extreme, and we know, that somebody will kill the mind for a crime of the body. Kill the body for a crime of the mind.
And the mind, with these guys, it just wants to get you in a dark room in the corner and beat the crap out of you. Well, you just got to say, sorry, mind, I ain't having this shit.
It makes me think of, I've always loved that, once came to me this term, I'm mindful of the time, but this thing about never mind. It was once I was just sat there and I thought, isn't that interesting? Never mind. Exactly. But so often we go into mind, but never mind. Exactly. So if I can just be still and never mind, but it's fascinating.
As you detach from the stories and the mental commentary, which just goes on and on and on, like clouds in the sky. And then once you realise you're the blue sky, not the clouds, and the clouds never touch you, there's a lot of freedom in that.
So again, for somebody who's new to this, that thing, I guess, the clouds in this scenario being very much the thoughts, and the blue sky being the real self.
Right. The feelings come and go. That's what happens.
What's your thoughts for, again, when people are finding that then from, first of all, beginning to open up and talk, and then really going on this journey of identity. What, if you like, practices do you recommend or invite people to look at? Do you have a particular take on, be it meditation? We talked a lot around mindfulness. I'm a big fan of nature, stillness, and just being still, and walks and so on.
Yeah, definitely.
What would you add? Are there particular things that you would say to people that can be easy? When we did all of this, we went in a way the tough, really looking very, very deeply in all of these very first time, which was great and important to do. But for somebody who's wanting to begin this kind of process, so they've had a lot to sit with here about just beginning to witness the thought and noticing that the mind is like this noisy person in a flat where they're wanting to be calm. But what kind of things would you invite somebody to consider if they were wanting to arrive at this more calm and quiet mind, which is effectively what we're talking about here, isn't it, with mental health and all the rest of it, quiet mind?
Yeah, you've kind of got to look at the mind first. We use the analogy of, it's like sitting in a room with a vacuum cleaner on, and it's only when you switch it off that you realise it was on, and you think, my God, that's so nice. And I think once people start getting that freedom from the mind, from the story, from the constant inner commentary that's going on and on, they started getting a sense of experiencing life in a different way. And then it doesn't feel as cruel, it doesn't feel as heartless, it doesn't feel as isolating. And that's a byproduct of just lessening the thoughts. And you're not feeding them constantly, are you? So it's listening to that mental commentary and actively just thinking, blimey, and actually thinking, why did I think that? That's not my thought. And you think, my God, that was my dad said that, or my mum said that, or that came from somewhere. You think the brain's just recorded all this information, it's just on replay. You say it's all my thoughts, my thinking.
Right.
So if you realise it's not your thoughts and your thinking, you're a step removed from it.
And what you described there straight away, and in fact as you was describing, what was beautiful for me was that straight away in that moment, I realised that because now I've had a period of time where that vacuum cleaner or the mind is off, all of a sudden my circumstances haven't changed, but I'm so much calmer. So that means my relationship, my narrative around the circumstances is different. Yeah.
It's the relationship, and it becomes about relationship. Relationship to your thoughts, relationship to your feelings, relationship to everything in the world. We're in relationship to something else all the time, aren't we? And how are we relating? That's what we need to ask ourselves, with ourselves and with others. Because you know, when you're wound up and the mind's going crazy and none of these compensatory activities work anymore, drinking, drugs, smoking, blah blah blah, whatever, it's not doing it, because all it is, you're just pausing it for a bit, and then you wake up in the morning and go, do you know what, I feel like shit, and now I've got all this stuff on top of it.
Well, what's beautiful for me is this, that we begin to wrap this up, is that I love how the fact and the way this conversation began, whereby knowing that, you know, there's all these issues that people find themselves wrestling with, and that the noise, I guess, of life, and then the world we've got on, and you turn on the TV and there's noise about everything.
It doesn't have to be a wrestle, does it? It can be a dance. Let's dance. Stop wrestling and start dancing.
Right. Well, isn't it? It's beautiful, isn't it? Because then it's gone from, first of all, me realising that, okay, maybe it'll be good for me to talk about something. As I begin to talk, I begin to realise that sometimes my identity is tied up in all this stuff. And then when I can begin to just open up and find a little bit of space and realise, hang on a minute, it's my thoughts here, then there's and I begin to spot my mind, and I then can be, I just suddenly start to discover there's far more calm. So from something seeming very, very heavy, isn't it? That I've got to address all this stuff, or I've got to talk all this stuff.
It's another job to do. It's another list, another thing on the list. And then as you become more and more detached, you probably wouldn't call it my mind or my thoughts, because you've realised they're just happening anyway. They're just coming and going. You know?
Makes me think of, you know, this thing about. I love those sayings that will pour into our kind of conscious, like peace of mind, because what then this points to is that we arrive at this point that people claim that they think it comes through this or this or this, but peace of mind, actually just being at peace and being at peace with my thoughts.
Being at peace with myself, completely. And I guess on the gravestone where it says in bold letters R.I.P., you know, rest in peace, it's because most people have like spent so much life in turmoil, but the secret is to rest in peace, not in pieces, you know, because otherwise, I don't know, it's just such a short time that we're here, isn't it, doing what we're doing, and you know, no one wants to struggle and suffer and be in pain, do they? So
and it's then the beauty of that is that then it allows a space in which when I do come into the barbershop or wherever I do and where I talk, that I can actually just talk and really, really connect and share, rather than with all the weight.
Yeah, in a non-judgmental space. So whatever's said is not wrong, whatever's said is not right. It just is, you know, while you're there in that time, and whatever works for you, take with you or nothing. I
also feel that you know, there's an invitation. One of the things that I've been interested in now is that I'm fascinated by the conversations that people have or that they don't have, and I think what you present and invite us to do is that therefore from that space it becomes so much easier for people to have really rich, genuinely rich conversations with lots of people. They're probably not having rich conversations, a rich conversation with their friends, with their family, with their boss, from the heart, as opposed from all the mind, and it's different then, right? Totally different.
And another thing is that you hear that people share things with their barber that they wouldn't share with their counsellor, their wives, their husbands, or whatever, you know. Which is, and it's an honour, and you know, you have to hold that with respect, that space that people are sharing, and it is an honour to do the job, and it's an honour to run the company, and you know, do the products that, as we're going to talk about soon, the products then work in line with that to help you with your mental state, your emotional state, and they're good for you. So that's all part of the other layer.
I think that's a lovely moment to wrap up this discussion about mindfulness, mental health, and men's health through the lens really of mental health. And I'm really looking forward to interviewing you separately about your journey, which I know something about, but I'm really keen to share it. But I just want to thank you for talking to us here about particularly on the stuff around mental health, and thanks very much. And
thank you. Thanks for inviting me over.
No, real pleasure.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah, I'm going to leave you to smile at the camera as I turn off the camera, because you know I never edit these things. I just like to leave it like this, and I just like to switch it off. But thanks again.
And good luck to everybody that's watched this.
Thank you.